Okay, welcome everybody. I have to say that I'm completely geeked and nerded out about this particular podcast because I just fangirl anybody, any woman who works in the field of STEM, and that's science, technology, engineering, math, and I'm sure there's so many other algorithms to that. But where I fangirl even more is when, and I know some people don't like this terminology, but just for the sake of being really clear, it's a woman of color. You know, people talk of it as a minority. I see it as marginalized. And when we can break barriers and be at the forefront, and I as one know the struggle, I will always celebrate and honor. So the guest today that I want to introduce you to is Dr. Kudzai Kanhutu. Thank you so much for saying yes. Welcome. Now, I want to know, please just introduce yourself in the way you would, in any way that feels right. Who are you? Who is Kudzai?
Well, Kudzai is, I'm my grandmother's grandchild. I'll start with that because she is somebody who I think represents my sense of connection to who I am deep down inside. When I was growing up, people would say, "Oh, you really look like your grandmother. When you smile, you look like your grandmother." And she was just such an incredible organizer, agitator, achiever at a time when it really shouldn't have been possible for her to achieve that. So that's what I always go back to when I'm having like those bad days. I go, "Who are you?" I go, "I am my grandmother's grandchild. That's who I am."
Oh, I like that.
And that,
I want to know more about her. So where was this, and where did you grow up? Was this Zimbabwe you mentioned, or was this?
yeah, this was in Zimbabwe now. So she, it's a really incredible story. So she was married, and at the time, you know, that my grandfather had several wives, as you do.
Yeah.
But she kind of established herself as wife number one, and then he died. So she was left with essentially 12 children, some of them not her own, to look after and raise by herself.
Wow.
So when you talk about resilience and finding a way, not only did she find a way, she actually left the village where she was because she was being put under pressure to remarry. Because it was unacceptable for a woman with that many kids to be alone. But she said, "I don't want to. I met my first love. That's it.
Yeah.
It's done. He's dead. I'm not remarrying." And as the story goes, she staged a what's called mopoto, which is you basically walk through the village with your skirts hoisted, exposing your buttocks in protest to say, "I will not marry anyone else."
Wow.
And that is the final show of, I am at a level where if you make me do this, this is untenable. And they essentially said, "Oh, you're okay. We got the message loud and clear. You do what you want."
So just can you say the name again of what that, that's almost feels like a protest.
Mopoto, which is basically the big protest. The biggest protest that a woman can do is to walk around with her booty out. Like, no, I don't want to do this.
Yeah, like I'm serious.
I'm serious. I'm serious. I said it. You didn't listen. I'm saying it again. I do not want to marry anyone else. I will do things my own way. And she left the village where she was and she set up her own homestead further up the valley, and that was kind of her new beginning. And that's kind of a spirit that I feel like everyone in my family has inherited, that you should, if you're not happy with the way things are, you find your own way. It's your duty, and it's your, it's your privilege almost to be, just to find your own way. If you look at the situation, you say, "This is not right. The system I'm in right now is not working for me, and it's not what I need. It's not what the universe is calling me to do." You find your own way, even if it means you need to get your booty out.
Wow. So hold on. So I've got a few questions, and I know we're going to go everywhere. So this podcast is titled "Did You Get the Memo?" And we're going to go soon as to what memo I didn't get, because we're going to learn more about, I guess, what you do, for want of a better word, in terms of serving people, whether it's career or job. We'll get to that in a second. So how do you know that story from your grandmother? Because just before we came on, I was sharing how, I come from a culture, and we actually have lots of cultures, just nothing to do with race here, where we don't talk about our life. And I think sometimes that cripples us, because then we're not handing over wisdom. And I can't figure out if it's shame or persecution. But you just shared that story so openly. How did you learn that story?
So that story I inherited from my mum. So and it's one of those weird situations you have. You often discover other people, through a medium. And the medium for me to learn these stories about my grandmother was through my mum, through my aunties, who would just share these little snippets of, did you know that, she did this one time? Did you know she had surgery after, the third child, and, she almost died? And then, these extraordinary events that happen. But you get that because people, I think you're so right. People aren't naturally disposed to talking about self. I'm going to
Yeah.
talk about myself. It's not what you do. So it's that relationship that you build and that memory bank that you build about somebody based on the stories people tell of them. So the things that resonated with them most, that did you know that she did this? I didn't know that. And people feel comfortable sharing stories of others, but don't so much feel comfortable about, this is what it was like for me. So I kind of regret that I never had that chance to actually ask her, tell me about that day
Yeah.
you decided you were going to leave, or tell me about the day, when my grandfather died and you were trying to decide what you're going to do next, and that you were actually going to become the husband slash wife to the second wives, which is what she ended up doing, because she took the other wives with her and said, well, we can just set up our own camp here. You don't have to have husbands either. If you want to come with me, let's do this.
So for me, when you say that, and the reason why I put my hand out, and because for me, that's the power of the matriarch. And even though I'm still trying to understand when people, people talk about patriarchy, matriarch, and for some reason, I keep on seeing a picture. There's a picture of 4 generations, my daughter, myself, my mum, and my grandmum. And it's a picture of me when I just finished my master's. And that picture is so important to me, because I know I couldn't have done it without all those women behind me. And I guess, I mean, is that something that you think has been strong within your upbringing? Because you just said stories from your mum and your aunties. Is it just something that women come together and share the history?
It's so strong, that the women are in. I mean, it's something that I think transcends a lot of cultures, is that women become the storytellers and the keepers of knowledge, the keeper of tradition, the keepers of history.
Yeah.
When if you think about, birthday parties being organized, anniversaries, events, it tends to be women who have that memory, who have that recollection. And there's this beautiful almost parallel in genetics where people have, mitochondrial DNA, and that is actually passed down through
Yes.
the maternal line. So there's
Yes.
even parallels in science that are kind of embedded to say, look, yeah, there are these things that we inherit, and we might not, we might be able to make it very scientific, but it also plays out in the way, in cultural artifacts, in the way we interact with each other, the way we share, and try and maintain a sense of connection through time. So I wish I had a time capsule and could go back,
Yes.
generations, and just sit there and see how did it actually play out? What were the smells? What were the sights? What were the
Yes.
sounds,
Yes.
at that time, and really have that connection. But failing that, no time capsule, working on it. I'm sure the engineers are working on it. Failing that, failing that, you just rely on the spoken word and
Yes.
capturing that.
I think what we need to really take into account, and I tried to do this when I wrote my first book, is, are we now doing that? Are we doing that for the generations that are to follow? Do we have to wait till we have kids till we start filling up that time capsule? You think of the world we're in today and how the world is operating. Where do we put that in? Because someone's going to go and write some history books, but we're going to need it from different perspectives. We can no longer just have it from one. When you just said, women are the gatekeepers of knowledge of history. And, I could feel a tweak in me saying, history for me, I think has come from his story. What of her story? What of others' story? That's what I'm really hoping. Look, I knew there was a risk we could go and talk about everything. So let me just rewind myself back. Let me bring myself back in. So tell me, or tell us, what do you do? I know you are your grandmother's child, and I so want to know more about that. But what do you do on a day-to-day basis?
So my do or my purpose is I work in infectious diseases. So I work with people in community, refugee, migrant families, people in aged care, people who are undergoing chemotherapy and have infections and needs, support for that. So if you can catch it or pass it on, I can deal with it.
Wow.
So that is kind of my purpose space. And I call it a purpose space because the origins of me wanting to do that in the first place were deeply embedded in the idea that health as we see it, what we should be always aiming for is to prevent illness. It's not about maintaining health, it's actually preventing people from being sick in the first place so that health becomes the norm as opposed to the thing that we're always chasing after.
Do you not think that that's how the rest of the world sees health? Like, I love that. We don't, when I go to some of my personal developments, it is exactly that, to prevent it. Whereas I think sometimes we have a mindset of, no, let's cure it once it's happened. But wouldn't life be so much better if it just didn't happen?
So much better if it didn't happen. And if you think about what happened with, in the HIV pandemic and what's continuing to happen there, it's about we wait until the worst has happened and then we try and rewind time. You can't rewind time. You prevent things from happening in the first place. That's your first duty for me, is stop things from happening in the first place by any, with all of the resources that you have. That should be your goal, because once the damage is done, the damage is done. We talk a lot about trauma-informed care. You should prevent. The goal should be to prevent the trauma. Of course, address when it's happened and engage with it deeply and work with it and lean into that pain. But you can always prevent it from happening in the first place. I think that should be the joy of science and the joy of STEM, is that we work to prevent things from happening because we have that skill.
I love that. Joy of science is to prevent things from happening. Oh, I love that. So can I ask, what made you go into this line of work? I mean, I like to think that something happens in our life that makes us think, yeah, I want to do that. What was your reason for choosing this field?
Well, so again, I spent a lot of time, in Zimbabwe in the 70s, 80s, and to a lesser extent beyond that, women really had only two career choices. You were going to be a teacher or you were going to be a nurse in Zimbabwe. So my family are split almost 50-50 down the middle, actually probably more on the medical nursing side. So all my aunties, when I used to go to Zimbabwe on the holidays, I would spend time with them, going to work with them, hanging out, because I couldn't really fit into the school system there because the times didn't match Australia versus Zim. So I would end up basically doing work experience all summer.
Oh, wow.
So that meant spending time with my auntie who worked in a prison clinic, watching her do vaccinations on kids there, and getting that feel of, wow, this is alchemy in action. I'm watching someone do something that is going to prevent these kids from being sick in 5-10 years from now. That stab of the needle and the cries and the tears, and then her looking at me and saying, look, they cry now, but don't worry, it's worth it, because I'll take you and show you on the streets of Harare, people who've been crippled from polio. This is why we do what we do. That pain of the moment in clinic, we do that because the price of not doing it is too high. So that was, like, for me, that real connection of seeing things in action, which I think sometimes we don't get in a context like Australia. We often don't get to see what we've benefited. We don't get that opportunity to be really grateful for. Did you know that there are countries and places and locations where if you had been born there, not through choice, that this is the reality. You don't choose where you're born. You could have been born in a place where you could be permanently incapacitated or debilitated because of an illness that could have been prevented. But when I used to see what she did in that context of Zimbabwe, where you can actually go out and see, oh, this child here can't hear now because they had measles and they didn't get an opportunity to be vaccinated. To see that so tangibly has made that career choice even later on so clear to me, that this is a clear path where you can do things and really understand the connection between what you do and the outcomes. Because I'm a 100% goal oriented person.
You want to know what's that.
I want to know what's going to happen.
Yes. And what I love, I guess what you're explaining here as well, is where you saw her give that child the injection, she's saying, yeah, it's painful now, but the benefits are later. And that's what true prevention is. Because for those who didn't have that opportunity. So let's go back just a step, especially as we are recording this in an era where the world is going through another pandemic. And in my views, when I look at my social media, there's so much contrasting views and opinions. What is the purpose of a vaccination? What is a vaccination?
So a vaccination in the purest sense is it's a means to get your body to be prepared for an infection that will come. So if you can imagine giving your immune system a really good training circuit workout to say, this is something you're going to have to deal with before you see the real deal. I want you to practice your heart out on this little piece of it. It's not going to damage you. The goal is it's not going to damage you terribly, but when you actually see the real infection, you're not going to get sick from it because your body's already going to have had the opportunity to figure it out in advance.
And so is that how powerful the body is? We all, if we were blessed to have an education, we got a certain standard of biology. And sometimes as you grow older and do other things, you forget how powerful the body is. So you're suggesting our body is that powerful that being given this test run, this trial, this warm up. I loved your analogy of, before you do that circuit workout, we're just good, is actually that intelligent enough to know, okay, this is just a test run. This isn't to kill or to eliminate or to, completely take us under. It's just to build our immunity. Is that fair?
Exactly. It's to build and to then have that memory of, oh, I've seen this thing before. I know how to deal with this. So when I see the real thing, I'm going to be able to respond quickly and actually do it a lot more efficiently as well. So that's the core principle of any vaccine is let's give you a practice round on something that's far less dangerous than the real thing so that when the time comes, I'm going to be ready.
Okay. Oh my gosh, I've got so many questions going through. What do you enjoy about what you do the most?
I really love the opportunity to connect with people and see each other, and to sit in that space and to think, hey, wow, isn't this fantastic that we get to sit in this space and work on something together? Because I see every clinical interaction as it's a relationship in time. Like I have the honor of being in your health space and you've invited, I'm allowed in. We talk, we discuss, we connect, and we hopefully come up to a plan together, because I know that when the person leaves, they go on their own life journey. I'm not there all the time. And I think there's always that moment in medical school when you think you're going to be some sort of like hero. You're not. You're there for the briefest moment of time in this person's life. Do what you can to support them to get where they want to go, because it's less about me, it's more about, here, I have this little kit of things that I can help contribute or share of mine to go towards your life journey, and that's what it's about. So it's lovely to actually have a job where that's your purpose, is that you get invited into people's lives over time and you get to share something that you've got, almost like a never-ending kind of banquet or a feast. Like, look at what I've got. Look what I got. Would you like some? Oh, you're not hungry? Okay. Come back later. Maybe we can talk.
Oh my gosh, I love that. I actually love your analogy so much. It makes it significantly less daunting. What you're saying though, I love that bit you said about, it's the connection and what I hear things differently to how people say it. So let me know if I've paraphrased it wrong. Almost like you feel honored to be invited into somebody's health space on their health journey. There has to be a big element of trust in that. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely.
Me as an engineer, sometimes I'm sitting in meetings and I really, depending on who listens to this, I may or may not get in trouble. We could be designing a bridge and we're saying that material isn't the one to do, or the way you've calculated it, that's not going to be 100 years. That's only going to last 80 years. You kind of have to trust that the engineers are going to do this right, so that when your children's children are on that train going over a bridge, that it's actually going to be fine in 80 plus years time. So the trust is huge, and even more huge when it comes to health, because I think one of our biggest fears as humanity is dying. But that's a different topic. I don't know why, because it's the one guarantee in life. It's just that we don't know when. But for those who struggle with trust when it comes to how infectious diseases come about, how it's treated or prevented, what would you say to them? And that's a big ask. You don't need to have that response, but what would you say to them? Because just as you were referring to in Harare in Zimbabwe, where you go out, you look at people who may be suffering from polio, then some people have this food of thought, well, actually, there were some vaccinations that cause more harm than good. Where does the trust begin and end?
Trust is always a two-way. And once you arrive in this area that we're in, which is of hyper digitalization, hyper connectivity, trust becomes really fragmented. So you don't know where to look and who to trust and what is credible information, what is not. So the tendency then becomes, I will just resort to the things that are nearest and dearest to me, the things that have resonated most. And that happens within the context of your life story. So I completely understand when people who are from communities that have not been front and center in any public health response before go, hang on a minute, are you sure? Because up until now, I had been completely ignored, and now all of a sudden people want to talk to me. Why now? That makes a lot of sense to me. So when people don't trust, it then becomes the job from a healthcare perspective, it then becomes my job to be really open in trying to understand, why would you not trust? What has happened up until now that would make you lack trust or feel that there's a lack of transparency? And the list is usually 100 pages long of why people lack trust or they lack transparency. And then it becomes firstly my job as a health practitioner to connect with that, to hear it, and to give people the opportunity to share that so that I can respond in the best way I can with the information that I have, and to also have that information picked apart. Because to be honest, I feel like a lot of the messaging we've had around vaccines, and especially up until now, have really not helped, because they've tried to be transparent, but then the message gets taken away and then it doesn't belong to you anymore. And then it sits in people's minds, it sits in people's hearts, it sits in people's anxieties and their fears. And then that's what you actually have to try and address, is that when they're receiving this information, what personal context are they receiving it within? And that's where the challenge is, because our approach up until now has been about, we only want people who are of a certain type to receive this message ultimately, and then we hope it'll fan out and make sense to all the others. All the others will get it.
Yeah. Oh, because I have to say, I'm I'm so in love with this conversation, because not only are you giving us your expert opinion, you're also using language that relates. And you know, for anyone that listens or follows me, communication is so key. You know, I think regardless of what we do, whether you are a cleaner, whether you are, you know, a space, I don't know, you go into space, or you're one of the people who build things, if you cannot communicate what you're doing, it is lost, especially within humanity, who needs that for connectivity. So thank you. There are some things that you've just really broken down. And I guess for me personally, especially around what's going on, you know, I even find myself not wanting to say it because it brings anxiety with what we're going on here. It's that trust and just wanting to understand, well, how does it impact me? And you just said something, which is, for you, if you go to a community who is nervous or anxious about a vaccination, you want to understand their story of what's brought them there and how can you get them to a place to feel safe to take it. Okay, so before we go back into that, what don't you like about what you do?
I tell you, the one thing I've realized about really purpose-driven careers is that it's very easy to overcommit and do too much, and nobody will ever pull you up on it. It's very rarely that people will go, oh, you're helping too much, you need to stop helping. And then that's a very it's a dangerous loop, because it's not like, say, you know, the finance people, they're always like, oh, my job is hard because I sometimes don't know why I'm doing what I do. But if you're working 24/7 in finance, people will go, you need to stop, like, really, like, you know, chill out a bit. But if you have these, and I've seen it so many times, people who are in whether it's not for profit or healthcare or any number of really purpose driven, or even spiritual leaders, religious leaders, that will burn themselves out because nobody will ever call them on it and say, well, at some point you need to like tone it down a bit, go look after yourself, don't worry too much, enough is enough. And it's that churn and burn where you get the the burnout and all of the bad things that come from somebody who has lost that ability to actually self-care, because they're always externalizing and looking for things out there that they need to go and fix and go and address, and they're constantly rewarded for that. Not only are you're constantly rewarded for doing that. Oh, so selfless. Oh, isn't it wonderful, all the things that you're so selfless, you're amazing, oh, it's great. Well, somebody needs to tell you stop. That's enough. Stop. Have a few days off. Go do something else. I don't know. Go eat some donuts. Do something. But you actually need to chill out, because it's not healthy.
Why aren't there people out there? Why aren't we doing it for each other? I keep on seeing a post of what they call female lead, because they post some great stuff about we need to stop glorifying, that hustle to the point of breaking. Why aren't we calling each other out with compassion, saying, look, I see you, but you're doing the most. Chill.
Because I think at this point there is still not, it feels like there are still not enough people out there telling their story about what they're doing. So for the people who are out there, it makes them feel like, I've got to carry more. I've got to keep going, because I had a message today from somebody who said they were really motivated by what I do. But if I'm the only one who's ever given them that kind of push, I can't stop. I've got to keep going. And it's because there are so many others out there who are doing, who don't have the platform and the visibility. And it means that the few who are visible suddenly feel the weight of, oh my gosh, if I stop, then all these people who have been messaging to say I've really kind of helped them, to clarify a thought or to feel motivated to do XYZ, if I stop, then the world is falling apart. It's that burden of feeling like there's not enough I can see, so I have to keep going. So the more people who get out there, because I mean, if we all look at our, we talked before around the circle that we have. I actually often deliberately choose to keep my circle quite small as well, because I get overwhelmed by people.
Yeah.
But even if you look within that circle and you look at the things that people are actually doing, but just that they don't have the platform to advertise or promote that.
Yes.
If more people had that, then it would feel like, oh, I can have a day off.
Yeah.
Because look at all these people who are doing fantastic things. There's people everywhere doing cool things. I have a day off.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's so right. I remember, and this is alternate, I'd had a reading done, and one of the first messages was, Yemi, you can chill. You're not the only one who's doing all the stuff. You can chill. Like, it's okay. You don't need to put a post to uplift people today. There are other people who are doing that. So just jam. You're right. And I think we need, so maybe this is a message. If anyone's listening, you're doing stuff, if what you're doing is really great, let's just see you a bit more, and then have a break. And then we can maybe pass the baton, and each other, we can have a break so we don't get burnt out, because we need everyone, especially in the work you're doing. So, because I need to now bring us back to coronavirus 19, COVID-19. What's your take on it? What's your take on it? And I asked that almost wanting to put some small print in by saying, because it almost feels like whatever you say, somebody will think something different. So answer this as you feel free to. Safe space.
Tell you my take on it. And it's the same take I have on lots of the things that are happening in health generally, globally. If you look at climate, environment issues, my take on COVID-19 is that this is more than likely to be a practice run for something that's going to come in the future. And if you can start to contend with it in that way, and to think whatever is happening here is probably a dry run for a future pandemic, what are we learning now that will make us better the next time? What have we learned about the impact that it had on women's economic security, on family violence, on schools and learning? What did we see, and what did we really dislike, and what hurt, and what would we do better next time? Because the one thing that I would hate to see is that people are still in this mind space of, yeah, it'll pass and then we can go back to how things were and we'll all kind of rush back to the old economy and the way we used to do things, and that's the goal. This is a dry run. Think of it as a practice run, and it might even be a good version of a dry run. Let's try and fix some of the things and the things that fell apart. When we saw people in high-rise tower blocks being locked away at short notice and the impact of that, when we're seeing what's happening now in Western Sydney and the way that the response is being managed there, what are we seeing that we see that is objectionable, that is not good enough? And what will we do to change that for the next time this happens? Because I don't think in my lifetime it'll be the last.
Whoa. Okay, I need a few seconds to just sit on that. We are definitely going to need to do another talk, because I want to break that down, because when I hear you say that, and thank you for being so candid, I hear two things. We have structure and systems, and then there's the health. It's no secret, and I guess I've never heard it from someone who works in the field, that this effectively becomes a test run. But you're suggesting it's a test run for how we respond to it from an economical, humane point of view versus how we respond to it from a health perspective. Is that what you're saying?
It's the marriage of everything, because I think what we see through the pandemic is that if you have structural weaknesses or structural inequality, it's just going to tear you apart.
Right.
So if you had pockets of community that were already marginal, already struggling, already unseen, and then you unleash something of this magnitude on them, it just exposes you. Yeah. So it's the conversation you have as engineers. You want to practice, you want to test things, you want to find out the structural faults and the defects and fix them before you get a 10-ton truck that wasn't supposed to be there.
Yes.
Because you don't know when that truck comes, but you anticipate that at some point something's going to happen that we hadn't contemplated. But let's think through it and make sure that the structures that we have here are robust enough to deal with an unprecedented event, but not one that we can't imagine beyond the horizon or factor in. Yes. Is this possible? Let's think wild and crazy here. What if it was a 45-degree day and a truck that wasn't supposed to be here came across here, and what would we do differently, and how would we help support people in that moment? And under the bridge there is a boat full of wedding goers on a cruise ship. It's that kind of.
Are you an engineer? It's like a modeling there. No, you're absolutely right. I mean, so what becomes our call to action? Knowing what we know now, and we're in Australia, but we're definitely going to have listeners worldwide here, and they're going to be at different stages of dealing with this pandemic. Knowing what we know now, what is our call to action as individuals and the collective?
The call to action is to really look at yourselves, look even at your family and your closest circle, and think through, how could things be better? What could you do differently? And that extends to how you spend your dollar when you go to the supermarket. Because I think people often like to think too big around, I'm going to start, because I've had lots of contacts from people saying, well, I want to start an NGO, I want to start a not-for-profit, I want to go and do something. I'm like, you don't have to be, it doesn't have to be that big. When you go to vote, that's a moment of empowerment, a moment of decision, that you're thinking about who are the people who are going to lead this country, this nation. When you go and spend your money at the supermarket, when you turn on the TV, what you're choosing your eyes to see is a moment of impact. When you're walking down the street and you're choosing to smile or not to smile at somebody, or you're walking past somebody who's looking like they're lost, that is a moment of impact. And I think it's about break down your full 24-hour day and look at it and say, what are the choices that I make that I have full control over, and what are the ones that spill over onto others, and really own them? Because I think there's a lot of lack of ownership of ideas, lack of ownership of decisions that is happening at the moment. And I think if a call to action would be own your ideas, own your actions, own how you spend your money, own what you do with your mind.
Whoa. Okay. So everyone listening, you've heard it here, and I'm not going to put her on the spot here because I am going to ask her offline if she wants to do another one. I definitely do think there's so much more. And, you know, my motto is using your voice. I love that call to action, which is own your ideas, own your action, own what your mind does, own what you do that spills over. And I think my add-on call to action for those who are open and willing at some point start using your voice, because you speak about some of these what I'm going to call injustices that have started to show really wide and far as a result of this pandemic. Like you said, a big brunt of the work hitting women, especially, you know, those of us that have been building, you know, our economic, you know, trajectory or, you know, generational wealth. A lot of that, you know, yesterday for the first time I started to have fear, which I managed quite well, but it's been getting shaky of, has all this work been in vain? Are we going to be going back to the beginning? And I'm like, hell no. You know, there's already a part of me that wants to start that change of, okay, what are the things that we've seen have not worked well? And what are we going to do about it? So for those who feel in the position to influence, to make the changes, we need to see you, we need to hear you. My call to action further on that is, can we do it with compassion? But we're gonna need to do it with compassion. So I want to know if anyone's listening to this, please share this wide and far. I'm really big on different perspectives, especially when you ask those. You know, I learned from a program I did that we should always surround ourselves with people who are more intelligent than us in certain fields. And I'm hearing you and I'm thinking, damn, did I choose the wrong profession? But it's not that. I love the clarity in what you're saying. So if you want Dr. Kudzai Kanhutu to do anything else or talk about anything else, or you want to learn more, and it might not be in a conversation with us, it could be stuff she's featured in later, then let us know. I'll make sure all her details are in there. Now, I could go on this topic, but I want to start talking about something maybe a bit lighter now. Now, before I ask what your top book is, I asked you if there was a message you could share with the world, what would it be? And for you, you said the world of health is a construct. Like architecture, it can be reimagined, renovated, rebuilt. We probably touched on some of it, but what would be your message? You know, if we were told, everybody, today's your last day, what would you want to be telling humanity?
That I feel like we have a real opportunity to contribute to building and sustaining a better world. And that fundamentally comes to us seeing ourselves as part of the world as opposed to people who just act upon it. And I think that would be our message. Start to see yourself as part of the world and to see the impact that you have on other things, places, and other creatures and environments, and to connect with that and own that responsibility, that deep responsibility as the, you know, basically the primary apex species on this planet at the moment. We're dominating. We are totally dominating. Connect with that and really feel your way through how you can make that impact and your role as someone who's sharing this space with other things, unseen things, creatures, waterways, land, soil. Are you doing your best? And just try to do your best, or at the least try not to do your worst.
Like that. Try not to do your worst. If you can't do your best, try not to do your worst. Oh, I like that. That's got to be a t-shirt somewhere. Try not to do your worst. Okay. Love that message. Now, I asked you what your top 3 books were, but I'm going to ask you if there was one you had to narrow down, one of your favorite books of all time, and why.
Oh, I had 3, didn't I? That I you know, just
it can be any other one.
I think I'll probably, of the 3 that I had listed, I think I'll go with the White Teeth, Zadie Smith. Look, I read it a long time ago, and the reason I'll list it is that because there is a beauty in fiction that you can explore and recreate times, places, and emotions that are symbolic of the time that we inhabit and allow you to really be creative and excited by what life is all about. in a way that a pure biography can't do, because then you're bound to, that didn't really happen. That's not true. And I love fiction for that. And I love the arts for that, because you can inhabit different worlds and different realms and allow people to connect with ideas in a way that I don't think they ever would if it was all bound in the truth and, the scientific method. Oh, that doesn't sound scientifically accurate. That, the fact that you can watch a film like Avatar and really kind of come away with it feeling something, like, wow, I kind of know what that would feel like. I felt like that before. So I choose that book of the 3 that I listed because it's a fiction. It's fiction, but it's so real.
Yeah, because you know what, I struggle with reading fiction because it isn't real. And I think that's because I need to relax my brain more. But what you've just shared with me means I'm missing out on the opportunity of dreaming, something I love doing. Dreaming and thinking about the what ifs. You mentioned Avatar, which I love. Whether people think it's real or not, almost isn't the point. It's what my mind can do. That for me is the joy. Oh my gosh, Kudzai. So we have run out of time, and I could easily go for another 45 minutes. But I truly want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. I don't underestimate when people give up their time to come onto podcast with me. Please understand that it is a gift, not just for me, it's a gift for, this sounds bold, but for humanity. We need to keep on hearing voices. And I hope I get to keep hearing your voice, because just the way you share it, it feels nurturing. I could disagree with you on everything you said, but it still makes me want to lean in. And that for me is an absolute gift. And trust me, I didn't disagree. I actually just want to know. So how can people reach you? Is LinkedIn the best way?
LinkedIn is the way, because I'm terrible on the other socials. Really, I'm doing my worst on the others.
If you wanted to know how to do your worst, just follow Kudzai on every other social platform. But if not, definitely on LinkedIn, and I'll make sure I put that in the show notes. So thank you so much. An absolute honor.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.